Joining us now is Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow Peter Brookes. Peter, I want to focus on the discussion, or what was said and what wasn't said yesterday at the press conference held by President Obama and President Francois Hollande of France. It makes it increasingly difficult, correct, for France to now bring Russia into the coalition to fight ISIS.
Yes, it's going to be very difficult. In fact, the diplomatic efforts that the President and Secretary of State John Kerry have talked about and been holding in Vienna includes both Turkey and Russia. So this complicates the situation significantly, not only in the ground militarily in Syria, but also at the diplomatic table, with the chance of finding some sort of solution for a post-Assad regime Syria. So yes, this makes things much more difficult.
But Vladimir Putin does not want a post-Assad regime. He wants to keep Assad in power. There's been the bombing of enemies of Assad. They are not in the business of getting rid of ISIS. I want to know, assuming that Russia's not brought into the coalition to fight ISIS that France so wants to build, what happens then? How does Russia react? How does Vladimir Putin react?
Yeah, this is very complicated, and Russia has bombed some ISIS targets recently because of the downing of the Russian airliner over the Sinai. But most of their bombing and military efforts previously have been in support of the Assad regime against anti-Assad groups, some which we support, some which Turkey supports. So it's a very complicated situation in the skies over Syria and on the ground. In fact, one of the reasons they say the Turks shot down this aircraft was that the Russians had been bombing ethnic Turkmen who Turkey supports in Syria. So this is very, very complicated stuff. And as we go forward here, it's going to make very difficult to bring Russia exclusively into the ISIS coalition, as well as get them to look beyond Assad, although they had made some hints that they would look at something different that wasn't the Assad regime, but obviously, clearly somebody who would be friendly towards Russia.
Right.
Peter, what kind of threat does this pose to NATO itself? And are we potentially seeing a moment here where Russia moves its own ambitions from the periphery of NATO right into the NATO alliance?
Well, obviously, NATO is very concerned about what Russia did in Crimea, the ongoing situation in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine is not part of NATO, of course, but that's on the border. Frontline states like Poland and the Baltic states are very, very concerned. Now, Turkey, as part of NATO, immediately called a meeting of NATO, which Russia highlighted. And, you know, the Russians may at some point, for internal propaganda or external propaganda, talk about this as a NATO-Russia issue, not just a Turkey-Russia issue. So it could increase tensions. Tensions between NATO and Russia are very high right now anyway. So I think that's why you saw the president and you saw the NATO Secretary General call for calm and restraint, and for Russia and Turkey to talk about this situation and prevent something like this happening again.
Peter, President Obama yesterday also commented on the terror attacks in Paris in that news conference with President Hollande, but he said this. Listen.
Next week, I will be joining President Hollande and world leaders in Paris for the Global Climate Conference. What a powerful rebuke to the terrorists it will be when the world stands as one and shows that we will not be deterred from building a better future for our children.
Peter, the president sticks to his agenda, and he will not waver, even in the face of a horrific terror attack.
Right. Yeah, Dagen. I mean, you make a good point here, and on the face of it, it looks terrible considering what we're facing. The worldwide terror threat that came out from the State Department, the continuing violence that is going on in the Middle East, the terrible attacks in Paris, the downing of the Russian airliner. You know, the fact is that the president made a plug for his climate thing, and what a lot of us were hoping for is that he was going to talk about upping the game against the Islamic State, which we didn't get. He's staying the course. His strategy, I think, is sinking. People on both the left and right I think are disappointed in it, and I think you know, darker days could be ahead if we don't deal with this evil that is embodied in the Islamic State.
Peter, it was good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Peter
for having
Brookes.
me.
Take care and have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too.